Jackie Chan was adjusting his stance in the mirror when the words cut through the rehearsal room like a blade through silk. So, can you really fight? Or is it all just movie tricks? The question came from Marcus Chen, a 25-year-old martial artist who had been hired as an extra for the upcoming film. He had been watching Jackie practice for the past hour, his skepticism growing with each choreographed sequence. The rehearsal room fell silent. Even the chalk dust seemed to freeze in the afternoon light streaming through the tall windows. The stunt coordinator's assistant, perched on a wooden crate in the corner, felt something shift in the atmosphere. The young man had spent 3 years watching rehearsals, timing sequences down to fractions of seconds, and developing an almost supernatural ability to sense when a room was about to explode. This was one of those moments. Jackie stopped mid-movement. He had been working through a complex sequence involving a chair, a rope, and what looked like an impossible leap between 2 platforms. The crew of 12 had been watching in fascination, taking notes, adjusting equipment. Now they all turned to look at Marcus, then back at Jackie, waiting to see how the legendary performer would respond to such a direct challenge. Marcus wasn't backing down. He stepped forward from where he had been standing near the wall, his muscles tensed, his jaw set in the way that meant he was prepared to make this physical, if necessary. "I've been watching you for an hour. Everything is choreographed. Everything is planned. I want to know if you can handle yourself when it's not scripted." The assistant reached for the small timing notebook always kept nearby, pen hovering over a fresh page. Something told him this moment needed to be documented, measured, understood. The room had gone from casual rehearsal space to something that felt like a courtroom, with Jackie as the defendant and Marcus as both prosecutor and jury. But what happened in the next 3 seconds would redefine everything everyone in that room thought they knew about real strength. Jackie said nothing. He didn't laugh off the challenge, didn't make a joke to diffuse the tension, didn't call for security or ask Marcus to leave. Instead, he did something that made the assistant's blood pressure spike. Absolutely nothing at all. The silence stretched. In that quiet, tiny sounds became amplified. The scratch of a shoe against the scuffed wooden floor. The distant hum of traffic from the Hong Kong streets below. Someone's shallow breathing. The assistant could hear his own heartbeat in his ears, could feel the tension radiating from every person in the room, like heat from a furnace. Marcus took another step forward. "I'm talking to you, Chan. Don't ignore me." Jackie's response was to take a single step. Not forward, not backward, but sideways. A simple geometric adjustment that changed the angle between himself and Marcus by maybe 15 degrees. To anyone watching casually, it looked like nothing. But the assistant, trained to notice spatial relationships, timing, and the physics of movement, saw something else entirely. That one step had fundamentally altered the dynamics of the confrontation. Marcus had been approaching in a straight line, building momentum, both physical and psychological. Jackie's sideways movement broke that line without appearing to retreat or advance. It was neither aggressive nor defensive. It was something else altogether, a redefinition of the space they were sharing. The crew members began to shift their weight, leaning forward slightly, sensing that something significant was happening, even if they couldn't articulate exactly what. The assistant made a note in the timing book. 1:47 p.m. Single step sideways. Marcus momentum broken. Marcus hesitated. He had been prepared for Jackie to fight back, to argue, to defend himself, even to walk away. He hadn't been prepared for this calm repositioning that somehow made his aggressive approach feel suddenly awkward and misplaced. "What are you doing?" Marcus demanded, his voice carrying a note of uncertainty that hadn't been there before. Jackie still didn't speak. Instead, he made another small adjustment. This time, it was his shoulders. They lowered maybe an inch. His breathing, which the assistant could see clearly from his vantage point, became deeper and more controlled. His eyes, previously focused on the mirrors, settled directly on Marcus with the kind of steady attention that seemed to take in everything without judging anything. The assistant realized he was witnessing something unprecedented, a masterclass in how to disarm aggression without raising a finger. The 3-second pause began then, though no one in the room would realize its significance until it was over. Jackie stood perfectly still, not in the frozen way of someone paralyzed by fear or indecision, but in the controlled way of someone who had found the exact center of balance and decided to remain there. During those 3 seconds, the assistant counted 15 distinct sounds. A car horn from the street, the buzz of the fluorescent light overhead, 2 people breathing, the whisper of fabric as someone shifted position, the tap of chalk falling from someone's hand onto the floor. Each sound seemed magnified, as if the silence itself was acting as an amplifier. Marcus found himself in an impossible position. He had issued a challenge, stepped forward aggressively, demanded a response. But Jackie's stillness offered him nothing to push against. It was like trying to start a fight with a reflection in still water. Every aggressive gesture Marcus might make would only disturb the calm, making him look like the aggressor, the troublemaker, the one creating problems where none had existed before. The psychological weight of that 3-second pause was enormous. Marcus had expected immediate escalation. He had prepared himself for a verbal exchange that would lead to physical confrontation. He had positioned himself as the challenger, the one testing Jackie's legitimacy. But instead of rising to meet the challenge, Jackie had simply existed, calmly, completely present, but offering nothing for Marcus to grab onto, nothing to fight against. When the 3 seconds ended, Jackie moved again, not toward Marcus, not away from him, but in another geometric adjustment, a half-turn that changed the entire orientation of his body without appearing to retreat or advance. Suddenly, Marcus found himself standing at an odd angle, his aggressive posture now aimed at empty space, while Jackie occupied a position that was both watchful and completely non-threatening. The crew members, without quite realizing what they were doing, began to unconsciously mirror Jackie's calm energy. Shoulders relaxed, breathing deepened. The electric tension that had filled the room began to dissipate, replaced by something else. Curiosity about what was happening, admiration for how it was being handled, and growing embarrassment for Marcus, who now stood alone in his aggression like someone shouting in a library. But the real masterpiece was yet to come, because Jackie was about to demonstrate that the most powerful response to violence isn't counter-violence, it's the complete removal of violence as an option. Marcus tried once more. "Are you going to answer me or not?" Jackie's response came not in words, but in another small movement. He reached for a towel that had been draped over a nearby chair, wiped his hands with deliberate care, and then folded the towel with the same attention to detail he brought to his most complex stunt sequences. Every movement was economical, purposeful, and completely divorced from the confrontation Marcus was trying to create. The message was unmistakable. Jackie was continuing his day, his rehearsal, his work. Marcus's challenge had been acknowledged, considered, and quietly set aside as irrelevant to anything important that needed to happen in this room. The assistant watched Marcus's face cycle through confusion, frustration, and finally, the beginning of understanding. The young martial artist had come expecting to test Jackie's fighting ability. Instead, he had encountered something far more sophisticated, a demonstration of how real control looks when applied not to opponents, but to situations themselves. "This is ridiculous," Marcus muttered, but his voice had lost its edge. The fight had gone out of him, not because he had been defeated, but because there had never actually been a fight to begin with. Jackie's refusal to engage on Marcus's terms had revealed the entire confrontation as artificial, unnecessary, a solution to a problem that didn't actually exist. Jackie finally spoke, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had spent decades perfecting not just physical techniques, but the art of human interaction itself. Every movement has purpose. Every action has consequence. Fighting is not about proving something to others. Fighting is about protecting something that matters. He gestured toward the rehearsal setup, the carefully arranged props and platforms that would become part of an action sequence designed to entertain millions of people while keeping everyone involved safe. This matters. Making sure everyone goes home healthy at the end of the day matters. The story we tell matters. Creating something beautiful matters. Jackie looked directly at Marcus for the first time since the challenge had been issued. Proving I can hurt someone? That doesn't matter to anyone, least of all to me. The assistant realized he was witnessing the moment when silence had accomplished what violence never could. The complete transformation of an adversary into an audience. Marcus stood there for a moment longer, the aggressive energy that had brought him forward now having nowhere to go. He looked around the room at the crew members, all of whom were watching him with expressions that ranged from sympathetic to slightly embarrassed. He had positioned himself as the challenger, the one who would expose something false about Jackie Chan. Instead, he had exposed something true about himself. His need to prove his worth through confrontation. His assumption that strength could only be demonstrated through dominance. I was just, Marcus began, but found himself unable to complete the sentence. What had he been doing exactly? Testing someone who had spent his entire career demonstrating his abilities in front of cameras, critics, and audiences worldwide. Demanding proof from someone whose body bore the scars of countless stunts, whose reputation had been built not on words, but on decades of actions. Jackie walked over to the chair where Marcus had been sitting before the confrontation began. He gestured toward it with a small economical movement. Would you like to watch the rehearsal? We're working on something interesting. The invitation was offered without a trace of condescension, without any reference to what had just transpired, as if the entire confrontation had been nothing more than a brief interruption in the natural flow of creative work. It was, the assistant realized, the most graceful way to give Marcus an exit from a situation he had created but no longer wanted to be in. Marcus hesitated, pride warring with the growing realization that he had misread everything about this situation, this man, this entire dynamic. Finally, he nodded and took the seat Jackie had indicated. What followed was 45 minutes of the most educational observation Marcus had ever experienced. He watched Jackie work through sequences that required not just physical skill, but mathematical precision, emotional intelligence, and a kind of spatial awareness that bordered on supernatural. He saw how Jackie collaborated with stunt coordinators, how he adjusted movements to accommodate the abilities and limitations of other performers, how he constantly calculated risks, not just to himself, but to every person in his vicinity. By the time the rehearsal ended, Marcus understood that he had challenged someone to prove they could fight, only to discover they had already mastered something far more difficult, the art of not needing to fight at all. The assistant closed the timing notebook and looked back through the notes taken during those crucial minutes. The geometric movements, the careful control of space and energy, the way Jackie had used silence and stillness to transform a confrontation into a teaching moment. It had been, the young man realized, a perfect demonstration of the principles that made Jackie Chan not just a martial artist or a stunt performer, but a master of human dynamics. Marcus approached Jackie as the session wrapped up. I owe you an apology. I came in here thinking I knew what strength looked like. Jackie paused in his cleanup routine. Strength has many forms. The strongest people I know are often the quietest ones. How did you know I wasn't really going to fight? Marcus asked. Jackie's smile was gentle, understanding. I didn't know that. But I knew that if you really wanted to fight, nothing I said would stop you. And if you didn't really want to fight, then there was nothing to stop. The assistant packed up the equipment and made final notes about the day's session. Tomorrow there would be another rehearsal, another set of sequences to perfect, another group of performers to coordinate. But this particular afternoon had provided something extra, a masterclass in how real authority works, how genuine confidence expresses itself, and how the most powerful response to aggression is often the complete absence of counter-aggression. As the crew filed out of the rehearsal room, Marcus lingered near the door. What would you have done if I had actually attacked you? Jackie was adjusting the mirrors back to their starting positions, each movement precise and economical. The same thing I did, made it unnecessary. The assistant realized that Jackie hadn't demonstrated his ability to fight that day. He had demonstrated something far more valuable, his ability to make fighting unnecessary in the first place. The late afternoon Hong Kong sun slanted through the windows, illuminating the chalk marks on the floor that mapped out tomorrow's sequences. In 12 hours, this room would be full again, with performers pushing their bodies to their limits in service of stories that would entertain and inspire people around the world. But the lesson from this particular afternoon wasn't about physical technique or stunt coordination. It was about the difference between strength and force, between confidence and aggression, between proving something and simply being something. Marcus gathered his things and headed toward the door. As he reached it, he turned back one more time. Thank you for showing me what real mastery looks like. Jackie nodded acknowledgement, already focused on tomorrow's preparations. Every day we learn something new. Every day we get better at being who we are supposed to be. The rehearsal room fell quiet as the last footsteps echoed down the hallway. The assistant made one final note in the timing book. Session complete. No injuries. Important lesson delivered. Subject transformed confrontation into education through geometric movement, controlled silence, and demonstration that the highest form of martial art is not needing to use it. The story of that afternoon would spread through Hong Kong's film industry, told and retold in the way that legends grow. Some versions would exaggerate Jackie's response, turning his subtle movements into elaborate techniques. Others would focus on Marcus's aggression, making him more threatening than he had actually been. But those who had been in the room that day would remember the truth, that real strength doesn't announce itself. Real confidence doesn't need to prove itself. And the most profound victories are the ones where nobody has to lose. The assistant closed the notebook and headed for the door, already looking forward to tomorrow's session. In a business where safety depended on split-second timing and absolute trust between performers, he had just witnessed the perfect demonstration of how those qualities extended far beyond physical stunts into every aspect of human interaction. Jackie Chan had been challenged to prove he could fight. Instead, he had proven something far more valuable, that true mastery means never needing to fight at all. The question hadn't been answered through demonstration of martial arts technique, but through demonstration of martial arts philosophy applied to real-world conflict resolution. As the assistant switched off the lights and locked the rehearsal room, he reflected on how many people spend their lives preparing for fights that never come, building defenses against attacks that never arrive, developing responses to challenges that exist more in their imagination than in reality. But Jackie had shown a different path. Instead of preparing for confrontation, he had simply made confrontation irrelevant through his presence, his calmness, and his refusal to accept the premise that strength had to be proven to anyone other than himself. The empty rehearsal room held the echo of that lesson, ready to teach it again to whoever needed to learn that the most powerful response to "Can you fight?" isn't a demonstration of fighting ability. It's a demonstration that fighting itself is just one option among many, and usually not the most interesting one. Years later, Marcus would become a respected stunt coordinator himself, known throughout Hong Kong's film industry for his ability to diffuse tense situations on set. When young performers asked him about conflict resolution, he would tell them about an afternoon in the early 1980s when he learned that true martial arts mastery isn't about winning fights. It's about making fights unnecessary in the first place. The assistant kept that timing notebook for decades, eventually becoming a director known for creating the safest sets in the industry. The lesson from that day? That observation, patience, and spatial awareness could transform dangerous situations into learning opportunities, became the foundation of a career built on protecting performers while helping them achieve their most ambitious creative goals. And Jackie Chan continued to do what he had always done, push the boundaries of what was possible on screen while maintaining the kind of calm, centered presence that made extraordinary things look effortless. Because that, perhaps more than any stunt or fight scene, was his greatest achievement, showing the world that true strength lies not in the ability to dominate others, but in the wisdom to make domination unnecessary.